I'm going to record this first part, I think. And then we'll see how that works. Let's see, we have me, Hunter. If any of the mentors are here, can you kind of join us up on stage here, up on the podium, so I can see who we are? Raise your hand if you're here, and I will pull you up here, I guess.
Seems that once you're on the stage, you're not allowed to raise your hand. Very sad.
Well, once you're on the stage, you're okay, right?
Yeah.
That's not the that's not where we run into problems.
Indeed.
So I was hoping we would get two more mentors here, but we will have to do it as we can. If they come, we will we will put them in. I should have copied down the premise from last time. This is not as good as I had last time, but it will kind of set the stage. We're not doing a formal debate here. What I want to do is hopefully you can all see, we'll get started now, I think. Hopefully you can all see the 4 rooms that I have set up, forest, beach, mountains, and prairie. In a few minutes, after we get done with these announcements and kind of what we want to talk about here, we'll have you guys move into those. I made those. Hi, Jeremy. It's good to have you. So in a few minutes, we'll have you guys move into these student rooms, and I think once you're in the student rooms, I have them set up for twice the size of our tables, and I think what we can do, is we can actually hold a little debate there. What I'm going to ask our TA and our mentors to do is that between the 4 of us, each one of us is going to go into the room, and we'll do a little timekeeping and a little nudging every now and then if you guys are failing to are missing points or are otherwise indisposed. What we want to do is we want to have a little bit of a discussion about the differences between open source and closed source. And we're going to do this in the form of a debate. And for each debate, you need a problem statement or the subject of what the debate is going to be about. This is called a resolution. Our resolution is essentially, on balance, developing software via open source methods is better than developing software via closed source methods. The thing about resolutions is that they're not any fun if both sides can't win. So this is not intended, I know that we're saying open source is better, and I know that this is an open source course, but I am not a rabid-eyed fanatic. I am a big fanatic of open source, but there are benefits to a closed source methodology as well, just not in this class. So this is actually something, there are pros and cons to both sides. And I'm going to ask you guys to kind of explore that. We're going to explore it in terms of this kind of debate. And what I'm showing here is kind of what we're going to use as guidelines. In a few minutes, I'll divide you up into rooms, or you'll divide up into rooms. And, you know, you'll choose, I think I asked 1 through 5 to do pro in favor of the topic, and 5 through 9 to do against the topic. So 5 through 9 would be arguing that open source is not on balance the best way to go. On balance means more evidence for than against. And 1 through 5 would be arguing that it is the right way to develop software. So we'll put some of each of you into each of the rooms. You'll select 2 people to be the speakers. The rest of you can kibutz and provide, you know, whisper in their ears or talk to them and give them things to say or points to make. And then we'll just run this little debate. It starts off, speaker 1 from team A, that will always go pro first. So in favor of the resolution, we'll talk first. Then speaker B, you'll lay out your case, why you're saying the right things. We can run a quick crossfire where you can ask each other questions. Second speaker from team A talks. They should try to poke holes in the opponent's position. Second speaker from team B talks. They should try to poke holes in team A's position. And then we'll have you guys can ask one another questions again between speakers 3 and 4. Then speaker 1 gets back up and does a summary, why they're absolutely right. Speaker 2 gets up and gives a summary, why they're absolutely right. And then we go into something called the grand crossfire, where you can all ask one another questions. In public forum debates, it can get quite raucous. And after that, you just come up and say, this is what I said that makes me right again. So it's basically a final focus is just trying the last thing you want the judge to think about. And we're not going to judge these. Oh, you can if you want. I don't care. But the idea here is just to get you thinking about cases for and against open source software and for and against closed source or traditional software. There is no right or wrong here. I have worked in companies that do both. Anyway, that's what we're going to run. I want to talk a little bit about where we're getting to in the semester time frame. We have I think I mentioned this on Tuesday, but we have a paper coming up. We will get started on it next week. You'll be given time during your lab next week to work on it. So, you know, and by that time, you'll also have all the tools you need to begin working on it. It's just a little survey paper on open source communities and your thoughts on them. But it is coming up, and it will be due, I think, on the 26th. Also, I was able to contact a friend of mine from the Open Source Initiative. The Open Source Initiative is the organization behind the open source definition. And we often ask them in here. They maintain and approve, give their stamp of approval on different licenses. You will be required as part of this class to work on something that has a license approved by the OSI. Next week, you'll read why that is a pretty wide open, why there is functionally not any difference between, not philosophically, but functionally, very little difference between the free software licenses and the open source software licenses. So it's not that limiting of a factor. And in fact, the open source licenses are a superset. But he will come in and he will talk to us on Tuesday. So please try to be here. It's it promises to be fun. He does a good talk. He's an expert. He was the director of the OSI for many years. Now he's a private citizen, still working in open source and teaching up at SUNY Albany. So anyway, that's kind of how we're going to proceed. Any questions before we get going? All right. I think once we break up into these student spaces, everyone will be able to hear everyone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you until 12:40 to kind of organize your ideas. At 12:40, I'm going to ask group 1 and 2. Please go to the 1, 2, and 6 to please go to the forest. 3 and 7 to go to the beach. 4 and 8 to go to the mountains. And 5 and 9 to go to the prairies. And you'll notice I ran out of icons for prairies. So you got a loaf of bread because the prairies are renowned for they're the breadbasket of America, and that's where we get most of our wheat from. Okay, Jeremy, why don't you go once we break up? You go to the prairies, Hunter Mountains, Kevin Beach, and I'll go to the forest. And our job is to keep the debate, keep time on the debate. It can be a fairly loose time, but keep time on the debate, and make sure that people are getting the opportunity to think about a bunch of different topics. So, for example, among the valid topics for discussion could be commercialization, ethical or philosophical issues. You know, does code truly want to be free, and is that the best case? Or are there other ethical conditions that mean that closed source is actually more ethical? From a practical matter, how does a company with a closed source solution compete against a company who essentially has infinite developers? You know, assuming assuming there's enough action around the given open source project. How would how does iPhone keep ahead of Android, for example, and is that maintainable long term? Let's see, ethical. Quality. Linus Torvalds' observation that given sufficient eyes, all bugs are shallow. Okay, so those are 4 different areas that you can kind of think about. The counter to that, think about if all bugs are shallow, if you can see everything, does that also mean the code can be compromised more easily? Or are the rigorous, can a commercial closed source limit the stuff that gets in and so limit the opportunity for errors? So there's a lot of different threads here. I just want you guys thinking about them. I want you talking about them. It's hard for me to get you talking in this environment, so we're going to try something new. At the end of the debate, we'll come back into our group rooms, and we'll open up the lab. For right now, I think oh shoot, dang it, I just blew my activities. Let me do it again. I'm trying to upload the PNFL definitions for everybody, but unfortunately it's being persnickety. I had them in here. Maybe I have to not share anymore first. There we go. That's better. Okay, those are the public debate rules. Don't worry about being too formal. And by the way, I just found out that my son's in a tournament this weekend, so I actually have to as part of this, I get to review the public forum rules. Have any of you done debate? Okay, somebody just left group 9. Cool. So did you do public forum or Lincoln Douglas or what? I need a second person in group 9, guys. Don't leave that poor person stranded. I sometimes argue with people on the internet. Does that count? Not officially, but it is definitely very good practice. It's one of the things I like about this is if you've ever gone to a debate or you've ever done a debate, you need to prepare both sides of the argument. And then oftentimes what side you argue is determined by a coin flip. So it's amazing as a judge to go in and you see people arguing passionately one side of the argument, and had the coin flip gone the other way, they weren't just going to give up, right? They have the same passionate arguments on the other side. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. You guys weren't surprised by this, right? I told you at the end of last class we were going to try doing this. And you can ignore me for mostly right now because you guys should be discussing your strategy. And this is intended to be a little fun. It's not intended to be a cutthroat thing. Okay, take another minute and then start moving into your areas. Let's make sure we get at least 2 people on each side in every one of our forest, beach, mountains, and prairie rooms. I, by the way, have a public forum timer. All right, let's start moving off. I think I gave some decent guidance, but as long as we get at least 2 people per side, I am good with this.
I don't know. Oh.
All right, looks like a lot of people are joining. Oh boy.
Hey guys.
Oh man.
Hi.
Hi. Let me see if I can tape this because I think you guys are going to be the awesome ones. Let me set up my.
There's like a video of the beach.
Okay, I don't know why that came up, but that's okay.
The video of the beach?
Yeah, I didn't put that in. I guess the idea is that I shouldn't steal code from somebody else. But then again, this is an open source class, so it kind of seems appropriate that I do. We'll let the other sides. I'll put the file upload activity back here so you guys can take a look at it. I'll let the other teams kind of deal with themselves. Mountains are... If I have to pop out of here for a minute, it will be... Group 8 looks like they're joining mountains. Okay. Hold on just a second while I go and make sure my groups are. Group 4 should be in mountains. And group 8 should be, no, group 4 should be in. All right, let me just go and take care of a few things. You guys have a few more minutes to interact, and I will be back in just a second.
Did anyone just hear a bee? Is that like the forest?
I'm here. Okay, it looks like they're going now. Awesome. Okay, our prairie only has 4. All right, good enough. All right, so you guys know what you're going to do? Do we have team A, the pro team? Which one of you guys are going to be our speakers? Who's speaker 1 and who's speaker 2?
Who was supposed to be in Team A and who's supposed to be in Team B again?
Team A is the pro side. So team A would be from rooms 1 and 2, I think.
Okay. I guess I could be a speaker.
Okay. And you are?
I am Andrew. I will be on Team A.
Okay. We need one more Team A speaker. Which one of you is it going to be? This is easy. This is not a hard thing. And I see Victoria and Kevin are both unmuted. And John.
Yeah, I'm like debating with myself if I should be a speaker. I'm not very confident in my ability, so.
Well, you guys promised to help her out, right? You'll feed her lines and stuff.
Of course.
I'll feed you lines too. Awesome. So what would you be willing to do? What would you be willing to be one of the speakers, Victoria? I think that was you, right? Oh, we lost her.
I guess I'll just be the second speaker.
Okay.
And I'm John, by the way.
John, and then
Yep.
I think my.
Oh, never mind.
I can be a Team B speaker.
all right.
Kevin here.
Okay, and if this goes the way it went last year, what's going to happen is we're going to run out of things to say before we run out of time, because you guys haven't had a whole month to prepare. So when that happens, let's let other people. If you have a point that hasn't been made, please come in. We're going to start it off with the first speaker from Team A. You want to start laying out why open source is a better method. Okay, and I will let you go. You can start any time now. I've got you timed for 4 minutes.
Oh boy, wait, was there supposed to be planning for? Okay, well, anyway.
That's okay. It's a
Open source, I guess, is a better method because it inherently will reduce repetitive innovation, and through the reduction of repetitive innovation, we can all build on a common idea to collaborate as a whole of society and reach new heights. And there's always an argument for capitalism breeding innovation through competition, but in many senses, a lot of times, at least, especially my personal experience where I actually have a trade secret piece of software myself, I find that it's oftentimes repetitive and not necessarily innovative at all. Companies just like to hide what they're doing because they don't want to let other companies know what's going on. In reality, if everyone works together, companies are now forced to truly innovate as opposed to have repetitive, unoriginal innovations that they patent.
very nice.
That's my
Anybody want to chip in anything else on the A team?
I guess for me, I feel like one of the biggest problems that plagues, software in general are errors in code, and I believe that more software being pushed towards open source would probably lead to less of these errors being exploited. And we have more eyes looking at the code, so there's a higher chance that more of these errors will be found.
Very cool. Anyone else?
I think open source is really great because it allows for a variety of viewpoints and points of view to look at code and input opinions. And it really is more representative of the world we live in that has multiple points of view than the typical self-selecting mechanisms, even though the self-selecting mechanisms may not be intentional of proprietary software and companies.
I like that. I didn't even have that one on my list. I think that's a good one. Anybody else? All right, so you guys have to remember at least those 3 points because you're going to want to summarize those in a few minutes. The other side is going to now present why they think commercial software is a better way to develop code. And there are some really good arguments on that side as well. So let me stop this timer. And whenever you guys are ready, you can start presenting why your case is the better. And if you want to attack the opponent's case, you can do a little bit of that as well.
Okay, so I guess I'll start off with generally in a proprietary or closed source system, you're allowing the software to and the people who use it to have likely a better support network for problems where you're not just going to have to ask a question on GitHub or or some other place and hoping that one of the other contributors or administrators will be there. Usually there'd be some kind of IT or just like DevOps person in charge of the whole project where you can have like I said, like a better support network. And like along those lines, if you have the paid system of paying for a specific set of software, it decreases the risk of potential
Sorry, that bee in
problems.
my ear is.
I turned the sound down on the background noise because it sounded like it was in the room.
I was swatting at it. Please go on. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. But I think, while it's probably pretty difficult to just on a major project on GitHub to just plant some kind of virus, I guess you could say, or just like really break the code, it's definitely a lot more challenging if the person is being paid to write the code, because what would be the point of jeopardizing the money they're getting? So those two in particular are two ideas that come to mind. Is like as you get into more kind of larger scale projects that might be used by more people, not necessarily just like a weekend project for fun, you might find that proprietary is ending up to be like a better design choice, or I guess not really design choice, but just like execution style.
Very good. Anybody else want to speak in favor of proprietary?
Building off of what Kevin said, basically about the customer support side of it, if a company is looking at using either a closed source library or an open source library, then something they might consider is, what if they run into an issue with it where they're pretty sure that it's something with the library itself that isn't working, or not even necessarily with a library, but just with a piece of software in general.
Very good. I'm going to throw out one more.
Open source piece of software.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were done talking, but apparently you just faded.
Oh, okay. No problem then. If you run into an issue with an open source piece of software, then sure, you could go leave an issue on the GitHub repo, perhaps join the development Discord and bring it up to them. But if you need a quicker resolution, many projects aren't necessarily set up for that. Whereas with proprietary software, you can it often has, like, if you're getting proprietary software from Microsoft, you have a customer service number, and you can call that number and get your issue worked through right there, right then. No delays, no relying on people to be in the helpful mood at the moment or anything like that.
Very cool. Anybody else? I'm going to throw one in that I just thought of now based on what you guys were talking about. Have you ever used a piece of software that wasn't good, and you just, every time you try to do something, it crashes and it doesn't work? One of the advantages of a proprietary model is that you don't have to release until it's ready. With the open source model, every time you make a push, people have access to that code. So you do have, so you lose the freedom of holding back the software until it's ready, in some sense. All right. Anybody else before we go into the Crossfire round? Okay, so for Crossfire, we have 3 minutes, and anybody who spoke can ask a question of anybody else who spoke. But we're gonna let it be a little bit looser than that. If you have a question to ask the others, don't ask your own side. If you have a question to ask the other side, go ahead. If there are no questions, we'll move on to the next part of this.
Okay, I have a question for the pro open source side. The first thing you brought up was involved innovation, and one of the main points you made was that with proprietary software, you can have two separate groups of people working on the same solution at the same time, when if they were all working on the same solution, they could be done faster and then go on to something else. However, I think a tricky thing there is trying to consider what is exactly the same problem, or how can you say when two things are working on the same thing? I think someone could argue that even the RPI open source community, between Quacks and Yaks, they're both doing the same thing. They're both there to course schedule. Would it be better if they just all worked together on one thing, or are they, despite working on the same problem, different enough that it warrants two different approaches, and thus having the competing approaches isn't necessarily a bad thing?
Somebody want to take that? Go ahead.
I guess to respond, in terms of repetitive innovation, I was mainly referencing much simpler ideas. I'm actually a mechanical engineering comp sci dual, so I've done a couple mechanical engineering internships, and areas like aviation, they just love to patent and everything that they possibly can. But the reality of it is that, the airplane engine manufacturer Pratt & Whitney pretty much makes the same kind of engine as Rolls-Royce, and same with GE. And they all have very similar technologies patented, and it seems like very repetitive. And at a certain point, it's not even about competing; it's just who can sell more, who has the cheaper repair costs, who has whatnot. And in that sense, I think that repetitive innovation can take place. I also think, if you have competing products, right, and you think your product is genuinely better than someone else's product, I don't see anything wrong with that. But in the same sense, an argument can be made that maybe if you see an open source project, right, and you're like, okay, well, I think I can make this better, what's to say that you can't make a competing open source project and still have the same fundamental support structure where you're relying on a lot of people and they can all support each other, as opposed to working kind of in a black box only in your own company. I think a point that you guys made, though, that was I guess pretty valid, is I think the biggest thing was efficiency, right? And turnaround time. With a smaller group of people, you can be much more efficient, and you can pinpoint problems probably a little bit faster. You don't need to rely on if someone's feeling like helping or not, right? So I think that's a pretty good point. In that sense, maybe there needs to be like a culture shift or something. Maybe coding concepts need to be made more, I guess, accessible to everybody, so that more people can maybe be willing to work on
Okay.
open source software. But yeah,
Hold that thought. We ran out of time for the questions. Good use of time, guys. You got one long question in there that made a point on your side, and the other side actually came back with a decent rebuttal on that as well. All right, so now what we're moving into is um, the case rebuttal. So now speaker 3 for the pro team, for the team A, should be saying why the other team's case doesn't hold water. All right. So who wants to start off with that? I got the timer going. So someone in favor of the open source software should be bringing up some of the holes in the proprietary software case.
I think that there's something to be said for the fact that yes, you can call the Microsoft Service Desk and they will help you, but to an extent, for proprietary software, um, such as like the Microsoft and their Service Desk, they're only helping you in order to get you to continue to pay for the software. It's not help for help's sake. It's help to cover their own butt's sake. And oftentimes I've found that when I've had issues with software, they'll only help you to kind of string you along and to keep you paying for their software as opposed to solving the root problem.
Very nice. Anybody else? All right, so I'm going to offer something on this one that maybe you guys can expand on. One of the open source business models is actually to take an open source piece of code and provide consulting services on top of it. So just because code is proprietary, or just because code is open, it doesn't mean that proprietary companies proprietary code aren't the only companies that can have help organizations. The difference is that the help organizations in the open source community have a little bit different of a bias, kind of like Victoria just said, right? Their job is to make you happy with their service, with their help service, not to keep you coming back to use an inferior product. So they really do actually need to be able to go in and resolve the problem. And places like Red Hat, I mean, that's essentially to some degree a big part of what they do, right? They package up Linux, which is a free and open source system, and they actually they sell to you support and other services on it. So that support piece is not necessarily only proprietary. It can also be an open source piece as well. Anybody else want to talk on that or on anything on the proprietary case? There's no wrongs here, guys. So don't be afraid of this is a discussion in a debate format, because I like debates and it was one of the options I had. All right, I'm going to kind of terminate this one. I'm going to go back and we'll do a case rebuttal. Now we want the con. So the people that are arguing against the resolution, the people who are arguing that against the open source model, Team B, somebody, if you want to start addressing the Team A case, please do so. That was a perfect case. There's no holes in it at all.
I just remember what they said about innovation, and I already we already sort of went into that topic with the question I asked during the Crossfire.
So this is a good time to summarize that. Not to put you on the spot, but this is the time to kind of summarize that and bring it into the debate. Questions asked during Crossfire are
Yeah. Okay, well, I guess while I still think they made a solid rebuttal, I still think the original argument about repeated innovations, I don't think that while at the end I don't think it's necessarily something in favor of proprietary software, I don't think it's necessarily something in favor of open source software. And I guess even though this is a discussion in a debate format, I think the debate question was technically whether open source software was better, or I think the debate question was worded in a way where I think if we can say that they're equal, then I guess we win. So I think at least that argument there, while it doesn't help the proprietary side, I don't think it helps the open source side either. I think I think the repeated innovations of discovering the same thing can happen either way, and I also don't think that proprietary code and patents are necessarily linked to one another. I think you could have one without the other.
very nice. And that was a good pickup, by the way. On balance means you have to be one better, slightly better. If they're equal, then you're absolutely right. So that was a very good pickup on the debate terms. All right. Anybody else want to speak on this? This is actually the harder part in these debates, because without spending weeks studying this stuff, rebutting somebody else's argument means you both have to understand what they said, remember what they said, and have something to counter with. So that's good. You guys did a good job. We're now moving on to we have another Crossfire. Any questions anybody wants to ask to clarify any points? If not, we will. If not, we can move ahead. Let's see if I have any questions. I'm an activist judge right now. If I did this in a debate tournament, I would lose my. I would never have to do it again. That might be a thought. I may have to do this. Yeah, let's move into the summary round. Okay, so now Team A, the first speaker, in fact, would be generally the person who talked next. You want to just summarize your position. Doesn't have to be, just we believe that open source software does this, and that on balance is better than what proprietary software does. That's essentially the formula. So go ahead.
Well, I guess, okay, we believe open source software is better because it not only provides the ability to obtain a variety of unique perspectives.
Ooh, good wording.
It also enables community error checking, which allows some people to be very anal about the correctness of the code, and it also helps focus on true innovations and helps prevent repetitive innovations. And I should emphasize that repetitive innovations are entirely different from competing products. If you have a way to innovate a piece of open source software, then by all means, you should go ahead and do so, right? But in many senses, repetitive innovation can occur when two people are working in two separate black boxes. But those three main points, right? The variety of perspectives, the thoroughness of error checking, and the focused innovation are all reasons why open source software is better than, I guess, proprietary software.
Anybody else? Very nice, by the way. Nicely done. Anybody else want to speak? All right. We will move to 2 minutes from the con side. I guess we'll call it the neg, so that we don't have to call you all cons. I expect you're not. Go ahead.
We're summarizing the against side, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I think generally, something I was saying a little before was the real benefit with the proprietary solution is probably more evident in a larger scale program or something where you're gonna need to have a consistent releases, and something where, kind of like you said, where if it's proprietary, if it's open source, every time you push, it's gonna just, there's your next releases right then. So you just kind of generally have a more stable piece, because I mean, obviously in both cases it's going to be probably a single or not necessarily a single person, but people reviewing it and making sure that the new code doesn't going to break everything. But there's more I guess consequences, so that would typically, at least for me, make things a little more if I'm the one checking it, I'm definitely going to make sure it works and doesn't try to break everything if I'm being paid to do so, and there's just greater consequences. So I don't think there's a clear answer for every kind of software solution. Just depends on the situation. But for more large scale cases, I think the proprietary has an edge.
Cool. Anyone else want to speak?
This kind of late to bring this up now, but it's just I didn't think of this point earlier. But
you have one more. Is this the pro side?
This is a con for open source software. It's you could run a project pretty much like an open source project, but if you're working on something and you don't want it to be used in a commercial application and you have that in your license, then it technically would not be an open source project. So you could still get all of the same benefits of multiple people working on it like you would for open source, of having a lot of eyes on the project. But at the same time, if you don't want your code to be used in a commercial application, or if you don't want it to be used in a military application or something like that, then that would then push it out of open source and into closed source. And the only example of this happening I can think of off the top of my head is the arcade machine emulator MAME, M-A-M-E. They used to technically have a closed source license because they didn't want their emulator to be used for piracy. And as a result, they were closed source because their license prohibited commercial uses of their software, despite the fact that they were still run like an open source project.
Nice. All right. So the next round would be another Crossfire round. Any questions you want to ask of the other side? This would be anybody asking questions to anybody. Do we have any questions? If not, and I think you guys have done a good job of engaging one another, so this is okay. In the Crossfire round, this is when you'd be trying to score points or have your opponents dig themselves into a hole. but it does give us a good time to kind of discuss some of the points. All right, so now we just go to a final focus, and this is essentially, in general, what you would be doing is you'd be telling the judge why you should vote for me. I made these points. So, anybody want to say what points you made for the pro side?
Be repeating like my conclusion.
Yeah, well, you guys kind of got into that in the summary, but yeah, that just repeat your conclusion would be a good way to kind of end this up.
Sure. So here are the reasons why open source is just so much better.
Don't say
First,
it sarcastically. Jeez.
okay. Well, all right. Here's the reason why open source is so much better. First of all, you have the variety of perspective, right? With open source, you can obtain so many different perspectives and viewpoints that you may not be able to obtain when working on a proprietary piece of software. Second of all, with this perspective comes a lot of people with a lot of different experiences, which means you have a lot of error checkers for you and a lot of people who are capable of being very thorough with your code and making sure that it's correct. And then third of all, because the idea of the idea that the open source project is trying to accomplish is public knowledge, there is no way that there can be two people working on the same exact idea at the same time without some form of different innovation involved in one idea over the other, right? And in that sense, open source prevents repetitive innovation and utilizes our brains for new things. And those 3 points that I made, perspective, error checking, and innovation, that's why open source is better.
Awesome. Anybody else want to add anything to that before we turn it over to the proprietary side? All right. Proprietary side, knock us dead.
So our main arguments, or one of our main arguments, was you have more direct customer support and service, and even if they're not helping you out of the goodness of your heart, they're just helping you to keep you on the product, they're still helping you. And also Kevin, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think generally having using a proprietary software development structure is just a greater insurance for support and technical problems and just ensuring like a stable product.
Very nice. All right. What do you guys think? Before we rejoin and I let you guys work on your lab. Did you find this useful? Was it a little bit of a break from class and a little bit of fun? Hopefully.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
I think it's good.
I think not having it be in the formal, like 100% strict 4-minute like debate style was nice, but at the same time, it not being strict meant we didn't have as much to prepare in a way, and it wasn't as like in some ways having the structure would have been better, and also having teams assigned out of just who was in the group on Tuesday, I think might have helped, because I'm pretty sure the people who were in group 6 today
We're not the same.
there are a few swaps here and there, I think. So
That's a good point.
yeah,
We will maybe, because we may do this again. I've done this on a couple of different things in different semesters. So we may end up doing this again, and that's a good point to keep. Now I'll tell you, in a normal semester, you guys don't change seats. When you get into a classroom, especially one with tables, the first place you touch down, that's the place you stay all semester. I mean, there are a few changes here and there, but in general, once you've chosen a seat, you don't move at all, and it's almost the same for these big lecture halls. So it is a little bit easier when I can sit there and see you guys and make sure everybody's in roughly the same area. Good job though. You guys did a good job, especially being put on the spot like this. There's some very good points. I was kind of interested that no one actually argued from the standpoint of Stallman's ethics. Stallman basically says that it's unethical to do anything other than open development, and data wants to be free, and therefore not allowing it. Open source, software wants to be free. Everybody has the right to all of the ideas, and doing any development any other way is unethical. One of the things you'll see when we talk about licenses, there's a passage I ask you to read that goes into Stallman's. Stallman is not an open source fan. Stallman is a free software fan. And what you'll find out is from a practical level, there's not really much difference. Anything that is free is also open, and almost anything that is open is also free. There are a few licenses that are open but not free. But from a philosophical, but Stallman maintains that there's a substantial difference, because just because you're getting to the same location, the path you take to get there is not the same. And he argues strictly from the ethics of having free software, having the software freely available, which is kind of interesting. I think you guys will get a kick out of that when you read it. I am a pragmatist, so I am not exactly on that side, but I do like it and I do appreciate it. But I like the idea that there's just reasons why you should do it that way. All right, let's rejoin our tables. I'm going to go in and I will free up the next activity, which is the lab. You guys have 50 minutes or something to work on the lab. I don't think it's all that hard. It's asking you to do a little bit of investigation on some different topics. Take a look at it. I'll pop it up in the window in the activities, and yeah, it'll be due Monday night. But work on it now, and you shouldn't have any problems. That would be cool. Shoot, I just saw this. Okay, yeah, you guys can move over there. I'll make the lab available as soon as I respond to Jeremy's chat. See. All right, so this is the lab for today. I think the main thing you guys, the part 2 community, you may want to do that first. That is the only part that actually requires multiples of you. Let me make sure that the Arcos projects are up. Yeah, these are still projects from last semester, but there are a bunch of them. Let's see. So just each one of you should pick a. Let me pop back here. I'm away from the room, so I can't see how many of you there are. That was not right. Okay, that was all right. I clicked on.
All right, is he back?
Yeah, I clicked on the link, and when I clicked on the https arcos.io projects, I didn't right click and say do it in a new in a new window. So I went away, but I am back now. So is everybody back in our rooms? Okay. Let's see. Why don't rooms 1 and 2 join room 5? Because that will give you that will make this a little bit easier. Then everybody will have four people in the room. If you go to arcos.io.projects, just go through and pick, one per project, one per student in your group. And go ahead, Kevin. What's your
I
question?
think you were just about to say, but I was just because it was like, team 1 do projects 1 to 5, then 6 to 10. So we could just kind of pick a chunk to do.
Yeah, exactly. Let's, we're not gonna strictly hold you there, but there are all the projects from last semester are still out on that link. So we haven't cleared them yet. So there are a lot of projects out there, and the idea is just go through and each one of you do one project, then synthesize them together into a report on approximately 4 projects. Group 2, if you want to join Group 5, you'll get it'll be a bigger lab report without doing more work. But if you want to stick together, that's also okay. I'm not going to be too concerned about that. All right. Anyway, go ahead and do that. Like I said, you might want to start with community. If you have problems with Gorse, if you're running WSL and you have problems with Gorse, that would also be something that you want to kind of check at. Gorse or with GitStats, let me know. I got both of those working on WSL. You do need to have a window manager like Xming running on your Windows part, but we can help you with that as well. So we'll stick around till 10 after, and I'll answer questions. And we also have office hours if you run into problems. All right. Thanks, guys. If you run into problems, raise your hand, and either I or one of the TAs or mentors will come in and kind of help you out. And I think at this point, I'm probably going to kill the, I'm going to kill the recording window. I'm going to kill the recording. I'm going to keep the window going.